Hello everyone, my name is Devon Edwards. I'm the director of Kilobytez, and I'm here to show you a quick overview of how Zerto Disaster Recovery as a Service works with Microsoft Azure. As you can see, this is the main dashboard in which it shows your dashboard, VPGs, VMs, sites, setup, offsite backup, monitoring, and reports over here at the top left. I absolutely love Zerto, in which it shows you how you can fail over your entire infrastructure connected either via a express route or VPN, a site-to-site VPN connection to Azure. So it's great. I love it. And let's go ahead and dive in. So again, this is the dashboard in which I have 9 VPGs. The VPGs stand for Virtual Protection Groups. 9 VMs is 9 virtual machines in which I have replicating. A total of 388 gigs is replicating at an average of 8 RPOs. RPOs is recovery point objective, which means how much data are you actually willing to lose in the event of an actual disaster. So let's go to the VPGs tab, in which it will show you everything that is highlighted on this screen. So what you're seeing right here is the VPG screen, in which it shows 9 VPGs. If you noticed, each VPG has a 1 after it. This is telling you that you have one virtual machine inside of this VPG. Now, let's just say you have 300, 400, 500, or 1,000 virtual machines. You're going to want to make sure to group all of your important machines together. So all of your domain controllers, all of your file servers, all of your SQL servers together. And that's why they have a VPG tab here, a virtual protection group, in which you can fail over that group altogether at the same time. You can also set up boot orders as well as to which virtual machine you want to boot up first upon failover. So for our example, let me just go ahead and show you what's happening here with my domain controller, KBDC03. Right now, I am currently logged in through remote desktop on the Azure side of Zerto. I am logged into my Zerto cloud appliance. So the direction that it's showing, hey, right now ZVM on premise, which is my local Hyper-V virtual machine, which has maybe 4 or 5 virtual machines on it, is being replicated right now. It is meeting my current SLA time. The current SLA right now is 5 minutes. So as long as the RPO is under 5 minutes, it's good, which is extremely well. So losing only 5 minutes of data is excellent. The direction right now, it's showing it's coming from my on-premise to Azure. Now, if I were to log into my Hyper-V server right now and log into my ZVM on-premise server, it will show the other direction facing the other way. So it will show it facing to the right. As you can see, the RPO rate is actually changing on the fly each and every second right now. This right here is showcasing some of my virtual machines, my VPGs that are on my VMware vCenter server right now with an average RPO of 1 minute 35 seconds. Usually that's around 5-10 seconds. I'm not sure what's going on right now, but still it's excellent for what's happening right here. So for our example, we'll just use this one right here and we'll take a look at what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and click edit this VPG, which will mimic what it will look like when you actually create a VPG. So this is what will happen when you go to create a VPG. It will ask you to input the name, the priority. If you click next, it'll go over to the virtual machines tab, in which you can actually select which virtual machines you want to be inside of this virtual protection group. I already have this selected. The KBDC03 was over here on the left. I moved it over to the right. We'll click next. This right here is a very important screen. This is the replication screen. This will show your journal history, your target RPO, and your test reminders. Journal history is kind of like a way of showing how much data are you willing to roll back in case of an actual disaster. So for our environment, we have 1 day. So any time period, because we have so many checkpoints of 5 to 10 seconds each, we can roll back and have granular recovery up to 24 hours, which is excellent, which is really, it's a disaster recovery as a service product. So honestly, if something were to happen at, 9 a.m., you're going to probably want to roll back to 8:59 a.m. So really, a day is perfect for that. Right here, we have the target RPO. This is 5 minutes. So as long as my RPO rate is under 5 minutes, it's good. You can change this to whatever time you want. You can add minutes, you can go to seconds or hours. We find that 5 minutes is perfect as long as it's under 5 minutes. That is an acceptable rate of data loss, which is perfect for us. The test reminder is 6 months. So every 6 months, Zerto will alert us or remind us to do a test. Like, hey, it's been a while since you've done a test in your environment. You need to perform a test failover, which is extremely easy. In fact, I'll show you in just a little bit. If you click next, go over to the storage tab, it will ask you which virtual machines, let me go back, which virtual machines, disks do you want to replicate over to Azure? Now, what's nice is on this particular virtual machine, we just have a 30 gigabyte hard disk, and that is being replicated over to Azure. I'm going to show you how that works in just a second. We're not paying for anything extra that we need to in Azure. It's actually going into a storage blob account. It's not going into a virtual machine that's called KBDC03 on the Azure side, which is really nice. Again, I will show you how that works. So if I click next, this screen is very, very important. This is the recovery tab. This will show you what's going to happen during a live failover and a test failover. On the left-hand side, we have the failover or the move recovery screen, in which it shows my VNet, my virtual network that is inside of Azure. I called it KBO VPN 7. Shows my subnet, my network security group. And what's also nice is that it shows me my what do I want this machine to become when I fail over from my on-premise environment to Azure. Because right now, there's no virtual machine that has this data that's running. It's just going into a storage blob account and it's keeping a day's worth of data. That's all it's doing. It's not constantly growing. It's just sitting there waiting for it to be turned on when I hit that failover button. So for here, I have decided to choose DSV2, which is a great, in my opinion, it's all SSD memory based. It's extremely fast. It uses an Intel Xeon CPU processor that's fairly new. And for this particular machine, we have it set to standard DS2 V2, which means it's 2 cores and 7 gigs. Now the virtual machine that's on my on-premise is actually 2 cores and 3 gigs. So again, I have 4 extra gigs that I can work with upon failover if I need to for whatever reason. But this is a domain controller, it's perfectly fine. On the right-hand side, we have the test failover, in which this is going into a totally different subnet for when I fail over. It will have no impact to my actual production because it's in its own subnet, it's in its own virtual isolated network, which is really nice for testing. So for example, if you were to do a failover test of your entire virtual machine, so if you have 200-300 virtual machines, you do a failover test, it will actually create an exact copy of your entire infrastructure and move them over to the cloud, turn the virtual machines on, and it will work exactly the same. So if you're rolling out a new ERP system, if you're rolling out a new Skype for Business server, and you want to test to see how will this impact our environment, you can actually do that now for literally pennies on the dollar. And I know that sounds silly, but the cloud is extremely cheap. It's extremely affordable, especially when it comes to DR testing. If I click the advanced VM setting, this is probably a very important, it is a very important screen. If you click edit selected, it will ask you what IP address do you want this machine to have upon failover from within the Azure virtual network. On the left-hand side, I have the failover as 10.11.0.78. That is within my subnet range on the Azure virtual machine for this virtual network group. I have also logged into Azure and told it that this is my domain controller. This is my DNS server. So when it does fail over, all of my information will still be able to communicate because Azure will know that this is my domain controller. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Azure really quick to show you what I mean right now. So I will go to the Virtual Networks tab, click on Virtual Networks, find the virtual network that is also showing on the Zerto side. And then I will go into DNS servers. Here I have listed 4 DNS servers. Your environment will be totally different than this. This is just a demo test environment. I have had my local domain controller set up right here, 10.0.1.77. I also have potential future DNS servers so that when they fail over, everything will start working. So when I fail over KBDC03, my domain controller, I have already told Azure that, hey, when you see a server that has an IP address of 10.11.0.78, this is my DNS server in which everything will start working. And I'll show you that in just a second. I've also done the same thing for my Zerto test network, which is a totally isolated network, not even talking to one another. I've set up a domain control. I told Azure saying, hey, 10.0.0.78 is my is my domain controller. So I will show you exactly how that works right now. So that's very important. A lot of people have asked me, what about IP addresses? This is how you put that here, and Zerto does make that capable to make that easy transition. It's extremely easy. This is probably the easiest software that I've ever used. Click Next. This is the backup recovery tab. I'm not going to go too much into detail of this because we don't use this feature, but you can actually save up to a year's worth of data rather than just 1 day or 30 days worth of data. Zerto has made that capable. If I click Next, it will kind of give you a summary of what's going to happen. It basically shows you everything that's going to be replicated over to Azure, the size of your disk, how much is going to be pushed over to your Azure storage blob, and it will not grow past that. It may grow a little bit in size if there is a lot of change. So if you downloaded like a 2 gigabyte file, like it may change a little bit, but it won't grow too much, which is really nice. So the space savings in Azure is really good. Again, your journal size will dictate how much data is going to be backed up. So I will click Done, and it's actually going to save that VPG and update it, which is fine, which we made no changes, so it will go fairly quick. And I will do what you came to watch, which is to do a test failover, not a live failover. At the bottom right-hand corner, this is the button in which you would initiate whether you want to do a test failover or a live failover. So if this was a test failover, your boss is like, hey, we need to make sure our systems are good in case of a DR event. You can easily run a test failover right now, which I will show you. If you were doing a live failover, you would click this button like I just did, in which everything becomes red, and as soon as you click this failover button and then select the right VPGs that you want to fail over, then it's game time. Everything will deregister from your Hyper-V or vCenter environment and then initiate and turn on inside of Azure. But for now, we will just use the test failover. So I will click failover. I have already selected my KBDC03. I will select everything else and click Next. Here on this screen, we can see that each virtual protection group or VMs is asking me what checkpoints do you want to restore from. Now, this is the really nice part. Let's just say for my file server, let's just say we want to roll back to 12:10 p.m. rather than 12:19 p.m. I click on this guy right here and look at all of these granular checkpoints that I can go back to. So this is an awesome weapon when it comes to ransomware. This is great. And again, this is perfect for companies that need to have an always-on infrastructure. They have backups, they use their backups, but sometimes you need a failover right then and now. And if you want to be up and running in 5, 10, 15 minutes, Zerto is your answer. Zerto is the quickest, it's the best disaster recovery as a service tool that we have seen, and coupled with Azure, the cost savings are excellent and the suite is excellent. So let's just say, let's go to, let's just do this one. Let's restore back to 12:06:34 seconds p.m. Click OK. This is totally fine. Now, why you'd want to do this in an actual production environment, I don't know. Again, the use cases are or it just depends on how it looks like in your environment. You can also specify the boot order. So if your virtual machine, excuse me, if your VPG has multiple virtual machines inside of your virtual protection group, you can say, hey, I want this server to turn on first or this server to turn on first. So you can actually specify you want which one to turn on first, but because each VPG has one virtual machine inside of it, you don't need to worry about that. There's nothing to do. You can also run pre and post scripts as well. So if I click next, I will click on start failover test, which is going to show you that some virtual machines from my vCenter and some virtual machines from my Hyper-V will fail over to Azure. So let's go ahead and click start failover test. Okay, the process has begun. And some of them are going extremely quick. Wow, my file server is going really quick, and that's the largest one. So let's go ahead and head over to Azure and take a look at my virtual machines. So this is the virtual machines tab within Azure. Everything that ends in dash testing recovery is a part of Zerto's test failover environment in which it is isolated from an actual on-premise environment. I also had 3 virtual machines running prior. One was DC Azure 2, which is my Azure domain controllers. I always recommend that if you have one site and you are using Zerto to replicate to Azure, that it's good to set up a Tetranary DNS server, a Tetranary domain controller, because when you fail over to Azure, you might have some issues when you're carrying over your domain controller over to Azure. It may not know, it may fail halfway through because there's no other domain controller to handle all the DNS entries. So it's always good. I have 2 for redundancy. That's just how I work with high availability. So I have 2 running. Each virtual machine costs me anywhere between 15, $20 per month. Again, really excellent for keeping a service that's going to make sure my company is up and running. So this is excellent. The ZCA is needed. This is a Zerto Cloud appliance. It is a virtual machine that is handling the replication from your on-premise environment, your Hyper-V, your vCenter, that it needs something to look at. So you need to have what's called a ZCA in which it will handle all of the replication on the Azure side, in which it will store all of that information into an Azure storage account. Now, what's nice about this is that when I fail over, whether during a live or a test, like we're doing right now, I am only paying for the compute right now during this time period. So this has been about a couple minutes so far, and I'm only paying for these virtual machines for these 1 to maybe 10 minutes that we're going to be using this for, which is really nice. I'm going to hit refresh because I think there's more virtual machines that are being created. Perfect. All of them are done except for a user's Windows 10 machine that we have replicating. My Windows 10 test development machine is up and running, and this is almost done. Let's take a look at the Zerto side to see which one's actually finished here. Okay, my domain controller's almost done. And Layla VM's almost done. Perfect. Okay. All right, so as you can see, everything is now failed over during our test failover. Let's hop back over to Azure. I am within my virtual networks tab under Zerto test, connected devices, in which I can now see all of my virtual machines and their IP addresses. And here is the domain controller that is going to connect everything. This has a IP address of 10.0.0.78, which is what we want. Now, for some of you that may ask, what if I have an Exchange server or a web server with an external facing IP address, and during failover, you want to make sure that you have that exact same outbound IP address. For you, I recommend that you have a MPLS that can go into Azure, in which you'll be able to retain your IP address, your outbound IP address, which also is called Express Route. So we actually have a service here that we use called Netrium. It works great. They basically become your internet service provider on top of your existing service provider, and your outbound IP addresses will work wherever you fail over to. So that is definitely needed if you have any external or outbound facing servers. So let's go over to the virtual machines tab just to make sure that our virtual machines are up and running. And they are all up and running. I'm going to log into my Windows 10 test dev machine, and I'm going to log into this environment. Now to do that, you actually have to click on a virtual machine, go to networking, and again, this is just for testing. You click on the network interface card, the NIC, then you click on IP configurations, and then you click on the IP address, the internal IP address it has, and you want to enable a public IP address because we need a way to connect to this virtual machine from outside of where we're at right now. So we want to create a new IP address. It doesn't matter if it's static or dynamic. Usually I just leave it dynamic and then click save. Okay, it says it created a public new IP address. Let's just test to see if we have a connect button. So let's go back into here. There we go. There's connect. So now it's going to shoot over a RDP link to me, in which I can log in. Okay. Seems like it's going to work so far. Again, this is a virtualized Windows 10 machine that our developers use. I am currently logged into this. You're seeing two windows because I'm actually remoted into my ZCA, which is where I'm doing the recording from. But I'm currently logged into my Windows 10 test developer machine, and so far everything looks good. Let's make sure. Let's go ahead and check here. It's cool. It still shows my IP, my domain. Awesome. Yep, shows my DNS server. That's what we want. This is during a test. So if I were to be a user, let's just say this is live, and I have some sort of access to remote desktop or VPN, and I want to make sure I can still access the N drive or some sort of drive. For us, we call it the Z drive. We'll double click here, and all of our files are right there. There we go. This is all of our files that we have here. So we can see that the routing is working. If I were to actually open command prompt and ping my server, my domain controller, without even typing the IP address, it's working. So domain name resolution is working. If I were to want to ping another virtual machine that we have here, that's also working. What about KB SQL server 1? Oh, I probably have to type a ping in front of it. That is also working. So everything is working as planned. So I'm going to go ahead, whoops, and disconnect from this Windows 10 test development machine that I just created during a test failover. and I'm going to declare that this was good. So I'm going to go head back over to my Zerto dashboard, and if you notice there's little red squares on each and every box, it's going to allow me to click that and say, hey, was this test failover good, or was it a success or failure, which is this screen right here. So if this was a failure, I would just select failure, but this was a success. And you can also type in notes right here, and we'll click stop. So I will do this on each one. Okay, so that was all of our virtual machines. We went ahead and stopped each one and told Zerto that it was a success. I can actually go into the reports tab and take a look at each recovery report in which I can give to a manager or a director and show, for example, this particular machine. I can click apply. You can actually spit this out to a PDF. So if I were to open this, and again, I just selected one for right now, but if you had like a couple hundred in there, it will show the status of each virtual machine and virtual protection group. It will show its recovery operation, its point in time, its recovery operation start time and end time, including RTO, which is a very important measure to have to see how successful you are in recovering. So for this particular virtual machine, we have an RTO of 1 minute and 37 seconds. That means that is your recovery time objective. That's how quick you can recover from a disaster. So if you have a power outage, if you have a hardware IT failure, a ransomware attack, like that is extremely quick. 1 minute, 37 seconds. You can have your entire organization up and running, failed over in Azure. Now, this was just a test. You can actually fail back in the event of a live failover, which I will do in another video. For this example, we're actually just did a test. So it's actually sending a signal over to Azure saying, hey, all of these virtual machines that are running right now, I want you to delete them, deregister them, and remove all of the NICs, disks, and anything that is attached to them, and deallocate them, which means the billing will stop, which is very important with the Azure because you definitely don't want to leave anything running because you're paying for the compute. So I'm going to click refresh, and there you go. Half of my virtual machines are disappeared, so they're gone. They're deallocated, deregistered, no longer working. And I still have about 4 virtual machines that are deleting right now as we speak. And as soon as they're done deleting, like right now, I'm not incurring any cost. So probably I've spent maybe $5 on a on a test disaster recovery, which is excellent. So that's unheard of. I'm going to click refresh again to see if those things are gone. Oh, there we go. One more is gone. So these things will disappear in just a little bit. But I just want to show you the power of Zerto, in which in the next video, I'm going to show you how the restore file function will work, and I'll also do another video on a live failover and fail back. So stay tuned.